Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Lethal Weapon as well as the latest episode of Blindspot. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you don't want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. For example, if you don't want to hear what I have to say about this week's episode of Lethal Weapon, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Blindspot. But first thing we're going to talk about is this week's episode of Lethal Weapon. So this case dealt with a up-and-coming football player kind of being drafted. Like, all these different people have taken an interest in him. His name is Jesse. Basically, him and his cousin got shot at, and his cousin ended up dying, and it leaves Jesse in a situation where it's like he will never be able to play football again. It's kind of like all his dreams and aspirations just kind of went up in smoke because of the whole, all these teams were going to be offering him scholarships to, colleges and stuff like that. So, turns out there's so many different layers to it. Because obviously, for him, his cousin was his best friend, but he was also the person there trying to always do the right thing for him. Like, you even see at the beginning of the episode, he's like, oh, keep these pictures of you getting drunk and stuff like that off the internet. The point is, gotta keep like a squeaky clean image. You don't want to cause any trouble, get mixed up in anything that could, jeopardize his situation. Basically, you end up finding out that he's connected to this former boxer, named Benny, who's trying to be Jesse's manager. Because it's kind of even sad the way Jesse referred to it as like, Steven was my friend, but it's like, Benny's the real deal. It's like, but even then, it's kind of crappy because it's like, your cousin Steven did everything he could to kind of always have your back. But it's like, I guess when you look at someone like Benny, he's got this past of being a boxer and everything. He's got this money and reputation, and he's putting all this time and effort trying to help you. Obviously, there's more to it than that, because, basically, all this is... I'm not even really 100% sure what it was that they were basically getting all caught up in. I guess it's the whole, program that they had set in place that basically... Because basically, Steven got roughed up by Benny because of the other dude. His name's Hancock. He's running this program. He wanted him to do something, because it's kind of get Steven to be more on their side of things so that Jesse would come along, because Steven was the one kind of holding out, which, resulted in Benny beating him up to the point he had 2 broken ribs, and you even saw on his side there was an imprint, which, Riggs was able to get that imprint by chastising him, and it's like, yo, hit me with that left hook if you think you're so good, which the left hook came and knocked his tooth out. Literally a constant thing throughout the episode. At first he's using cement glue to put his tooth back in, which I can kind of relate to. I literally had a moment like that in high school where my lenses would constantly pop out that from my glasses at the time, that I would actually use kind of cement glue to kind of keep them in place. It was a whole thing, so I can kind of relate. Not necessarily to the whole tooth situation, even dropping it in the salad. I love the fact that he offers it to Roger. He's like, oh yeah, after you stormed off, I got this salad for you on the go. He's like, is that the same salad you dropped your tooth in? It's like, wait, you telling me you're not going to eat the salad? It's like, well, and then he just kind of eats it. Well, we don't see him eat it, but I can only assume he eats it because he pulls it out and everything. But it turns out one of the main people behind this was kind of his mom. His mom basically owed money to certain people, and basically, like I said, Steven was always doing his best to be like, oh no, Jesse shouldn't do this, that, and that. It's like he kept thinking he knew, Jesse's mom didn't appreciate the fact is that Steven was kind of high and mighty and just assumed he knew better about their circumstances. He knew what was best for her and her son, even though it was like, this is my son. Basically, she owed the wrong people money that ended up being the dude Wendell, who kind of cracks a joke. It's kind of interesting. I always like that in crime dramas where it's that one person that you see literally one time in an episode. Turns out they're kind of the main bad guy. In this particular case, it's Wendell. Him and his group are the ones that, or at the very least Wendell himself, but probably his grown goons that were with him was also behind. Not also was. It's a situation where, even Jesse kind of brings up at the end of the episode, he's like, my mom had the best of intentions. She wanted to do what was best for me, because, in her own way, because it's they kind of in a very bad neighborhood, and, for him, his scholarship meant not only a new start for him, but also a new start for his mom, part of you look at his mom's very money hungry, which could be a contributing factor. More so than anything, as we know, she owed the wrong people money, so that played a part in it. But it turns out Wendell was behind it. So, but I bring it up because it's the only other scene he was in was the fact is that he was getting on Riggs about smelling like booze. It's like, dude, do you have a problem? And Riggs like, no, there was a there was a table and there was alcohol and it was, never mind. And he's trying to explain himself. Which is like, Riggs loves jumping out some windows. It's like every episode, there's at least one moment of him just jumping out a window. Like in this particular episode, it was grabbing onto that guy, Carson, he was chasing, pulling him out the window, and they both landing on that ping pong ball table. That was obviously the main case of the episode, but it also dealt with the whole like Riggs struggling with the fact that it's like, oh, him and Palmer slept together, yay! But then it's also the fact is that he likes this time they're spending together. There's even a moment where he even admits it to Cahill. It's like, yeah, me and Palmer, yeah. And she's like, oh, that's good. But he kind of does a little transference of his own of being like, hey, you know, why are you like, oh, I tell you I'm happy, but now you just want to pick it apart, act like there's something wrong. It's because he himself felt like it was wrong, because it's a situation where it's like he feels guilty. Like, you know, it ends up coming up later on. It's like, there's no reason to be mad about the fact is that you're happy. That's not a bad thing. It's okay, you know, it's like, you know, things with Palmer is kind of just taking that step in the right direction, because it's like, you know, like I said, he's kind of putting himself out there subsequently to Miranda. And it's like, you know, even Miranda herself wouldn't want you just moping around. Like I said, you see moments where it's just like, there was that moment at the beginning of the episode when he was in there, because it's like the guy referred to as like, because he saw Riggs' wedding ring and he just assumed that Palmer was his wife, and it struck a nerve. And he was about to open a bottle, like a little shot bottle, but he just cracked it up and smelled it and then put it back. I was like, good. But then later on, he heard Palmer's message on his phone, but then he looks and sees the picture of Miranda, and it just he kind of like, obviously he's been a little all over the place this episode, mainly because it was all in his head, but he was also got super drunk and pissed himself, even bashing his own head in the mirror just because he couldn't stand looking at his own reflection. Because like, it all comes down to the fact is that he thinks he's betraying Miranda. Like, even though she would legitimately want him to go off and be happy, you know, she wouldn't want him to kind of, you know, die with her, you know? It's like, yeah, I'm gone, but, you know, you still have your whole life in front of you. Well, also, you know, there's also dealt with Roger and his whole, like, dreams and aspirations of wanting to be a football player, too. So when he looks at Jesse, he sees a lot of himself. He had an opportunity, injury came up, and so... But, you know, it's kind of the same thing he tells to Jesse. It's like, you know, football isn't everything. You know, you go to school. He went off to school. He eventually became a cop. So he found a different path in life, that football isn't just the only answer. There are other answers. Like, you know, Jesse can go to school for anything and, you know, find a different path in life, you know. He was even getting offered another job in this episode. It would basically mean he kind of work different hours. He'd be working a safer job. Plus, Riggs wouldn't be his partner. Which, you know, even Riggs is like, you try to say, like, you're miserable, but it's like, I see the way you are. Maybe you're only happy when you're miserable. It's like, no matter how much Roger complains, I don't think he can. I mean, it's hard to say. There are moments where it's like, yeah, Riggs does push him, but at the same time, he does understand that Riggs is messed up in his own way, but he probably wouldn't want any other partner. I also love the conversation Riggs had with Bailey. And he's like, oh, do you have a burger in here? And Bailey's like, I'm a vegetarian. He's like, really? She's like, yeah, I told you that before. Was I there? He's like, oh, man, this was such a good conversation. I'm definitely going to remember this. So, also an interesting thing, too, was about Avery, because he was like everyone else, found out about Jesse. Like, okay, so tell me that Jesse's okay. Because, you know, tell me he's still going to Coastal. Oh, he'll never play football. Oh, man, that just sucks. I mean, it sucks. I mean, it's a great loss for him and his family, you know, and even brings up the fact is that he was like, yeah, because like Roger's like, why do you know so much about like, you know, up and coming people in the football world? It's like, how do you know so much about him? He's like, well, basically because he's like, you know, he didn't play the game himself, but he was in the marching band. It's like, oh, we spent so much time out there on the field. Our practice time was just the same as the team. So it's like, oh, we put just as much hard work and dedication out there as people who play football. He's like, hey, the fact of the matter is the French horn was hard because it was like the horn, but, you know, French. So the whole thing that sparked the whole conversation about like kind of the money situation was his daughter bringing up the fact is that their mom, like Trish, wasn't working. The fact is that like he, you know, it came up last episode too. Like the fact is that, you know, Roger's income by itself wouldn't be enough to sustain like them, you know, all three of his children going to college, or even like kind of living the life that they've lived so far, just kind of like being able to say, you know, just kind of, you know, everything would have to basically change, and that Roger wouldn't be able to retire until 18 years later or something like that. Even, Avery brought it up. He's like, because he's talking to Avery, he's like, do you ever have anyone kind of work here a little bit longer? And he's like, oh, look at Chef over there. It's like, man, he just keeps turning down retirement. It's not like he has anybody. He just loves the job. It's like, if only we were all as good and as dedicated as Chef. And he looks at them, he kind of waves a hand, and you almost see a smile on his face, but it quickly disappears. It's almost like he was a little dead inside when that happened. But because Trish is enjoying life, she's doing pottery, she's running. Because at first Roger's like, oh, you're looking for a job. It's like, oh, you're not, you're just doing your thing. It's okay. But by the end of the episode, she admits, she's like, you're kind of nervous about this whole situation. She's like, yeah, it'll work out. Talking to her daughter about it too. It's like, don't kind of get so caught up in everything. No matter what happens, we're always going to have each other. It's not going to be a situation where it's like, yeah, it's just like, yeah, don't get so caught up on materialistic things like, oh, the fact is you might have to share a room with your brother. I mean, it would never get to that point. Like, you might have to change your entire lifestyle or something like that. But no matter what, it's like we still have each other. It's kind of the main point. And it's like Trish isn't the type to just kind of sit around and do nothing. Like, she's, still trying to decide what she's going to do, whether she's going to go back to the firm or not. So, and also I love the final note of the episode being Riggs being pulled into the room. She's like, oh, what took you so long? It's like, what happened to your tooth? So, because he had the conversation with Dr. Cahill, and she was kind of like, oh, it's okay to kind of be happy. Which then in the back of my mind, I was like, is this going to be like a moment where to kind of spark a conversation, like where we see like, oh, it's not Palmer that makes him happy, but Cahill. But it's like, no, it's not like that. It's just, I don't think he looks at Cahill like that. I think he does legitimately look at her as the woman like who is helping fix him, kind of put him back, making him a real boy again. If you want to kind of, I mean, that was me kind of making a Pinocchio reference. Like I said, I got to figure out how to do these Wednesday recordings without screwing myself over completely. That's not your problem. That's 100% my own, so I apologize for that. But overall, a very good episode, and I'm very interested to see what goes down next week. And now moving on to this week's episode of Blindspot. This episode was very interesting in the way that it was designed. It basically is an episode where you basically got different perspectives. Like basically the entire team split up into 3 groups. You had Roman and Kurt in one group. You had Tasha and Jane in another, and then Reed and Patterson, all like multiple different tattoos kind of leading to basically they're all connected to the same thing, but they're just coming at this particular thing from 3 different perspectives. Obviously, like, the main plot is dealing with this whole situation, but it's also like the inner working relationships of everyone. I mean, because on top of all this, like, yeah, that thing at the beginning where Roman is training with Kurt, because it's like Kurt's like, hey, it worked with Jane, it helped get her memory back. I was hoping it would do the same thing, which is like it's interesting because at first she's like, what's going on here, and then like it's almost like almost makes you smile moment because it's like, hey, Kurt and Roman are actually getting a little closer, which they do in the episode. Well, since I'm already talking about, I'll go ahead and bring it up though. It's like, Kurt's like, hey, I'll bring Roman out into the field and everything. Because basically, this, like, his bosses and everyone above him is kind of like, yo, Roman needs to show some results soon, remembering some crap, or basically we're going to hand him over to the CIA. So it's like, hurry up and remember something, which he did. But remember, Jane still hasn't told him anything because Jane's like, the fact is, if Kurt finds out what you did to Emma, like, he won't forgive you. He won't ever let you leave again. I mean, he might just be inclined just to hand you over to the CIA. Granted, he'd be reserved to do it because, for Jane's sake, but also just because it's like he knows that they could still use Roman, but, it hit him emotionally just because of how important the Shawls were to him. But you also have Roman being like, yeah, but how's Kurt going to feel when he finds out that you've been lying to him? So it's like, ooh. I was actually halfway expecting Roman to actually bring it up, just kind of like casually bring it up at the end of the episode. Be like, Kurt got something to tell you. Like, you want me to remember something? Just so he could remember something. He knew it'd get him in trouble. But I would think that at very least he'd tell this to Kurt so at least he'd have a reason to stay. But nevertheless, they're going undercover and everything. And like at one point, Roman does like kind of a rash thing, but it's like, he did it for a good reason, and it's like, okay, that was rash, but Kurt's like, but that's still good work. And the fact is that Roman, obviously there's a whole aspect, just like much like Jane, there's the whole aspect of like, hey, even with their memories lost, there's still kind of that muscle memory type of situation. So it's like he was able to easily remember his the background to his whole situation, like figuring out that obviously the alias that's been set in place for him. What I like, interestingly enough, is the doctor in this episode. His name was Dr. Katz. It's played by John Wesley Shipp, who you may or may not know is played Papa Allen on The Flash. He actually played The Flash himself back in like a 90s version of the show, but currently plays Jay Garrick on The Flash. So it's like, the moment I saw it, it's like, John Wesley Shipp. I just get excited like that, nevertheless. So that was cool. Because even Kurt himself kind of admits that he's like, yo, like him and Roman kind of bonded. It actually felt good working together and everything. He even had Roman's back later in an episode when the guy was about to like slit Roman's throat. Like Kurt showed up and took him down, and it's like, and you see Jane kind of running over like, okay, oh my God, Roman, you okay? And she looks at Kurt, cause it's like, thankful, like, you saved my brother, cause it's like, it's really adorable when you actually see that dude, like seeing like that concern for, it's like, she legitimately loves her brother. It's like, once again, it's one of those situations, kind of brought it up. I've talked about it a little bit in podcasts today when I was talking about the 100. It's like secrets don't stay buried forever. And eventually both secrets she's keeping is going to come out. It's like, cause literally him saying like, oh, what's Kurt going to think when he finds out that you've been hiding the truth? It's like, how's Roman going to feel when you find out, he finds out you're hiding the truth? It's like, she's hiding the truth from the two most important people to her. Cause like, I brought it up, like it was that whole dream sequence. Wasn't that no, that was definitely this season. I'm stupid. I was about to say, was that last season? The whole dream sequence about Jane having her brother there at dinner with her, but also being with Kurt. So it's like, dude, it's like you see bits of that reality kind of sinking in, and especially under these circumstances. Like she has a brother, kind of the man that she has feelings for, but it's like she's already dating someone else, and he was also dating someone else. Which, like I said, I don't know if I don't think Jane knows about the whole him and Nas breaking up thing, because like they didn't make a spectacle of it. Because subsequently, even now, they're still like, hey, let's keep it professional and not let it interfere with our lives. I guess Kurt's still, trying to keep it professional too, in the sense of not really bringing up the whole Allie situation because she did move. I think that's kind of already a thing that happened. It's not like it's still in work in progress. It seems like that's something that's already happened, and now he's still kind of dealing with the aftermath of it. But he hasn't really. I guess he's been kind of neck deep in work to kind of deal with it. I mean, that's kind of what they all do. But I'll kind of get to the case overall, kind of near the end. I'll go ahead and bring it up. It turns out this whole case, like different perspectives. Basically, there was like this connects to some black market kind of shipment transfer dude. I don't know why I refer to him as that, but I forgot his name. It's like Lalus or something like that. I know, I'm terrible. But basically he ships stuff for people kind of on the black market type of situation. Then there's also like the other side of the investigation where it's like, oh yeah, there's like a lot of like immigrant people. And then it ties into Dr. Katz, who has this whole spa situation. And it turns out that basically all of this is about it seems like at first it's like human trafficking, which to a certain degree it is, but it's about human trafficking organs, basically selling them on a black market. That basically a spa is supposed to be like, obviously they get immigrants and basically sneak them in and then basically use them as, like harvest them for their organs to give to other people, just like, under the table black market organ dealings and stuff like that. So that's kind of what the big overall case was about. Dr. Katz, John Wesley Shipp's character, got it really hard in this episode. Like he was just left bleeding profusely on his table. But nevertheless, kind of going to the other side of things, it's the whole Tasha and Jane situation, which is weird because you never really see them alone together, and that's what made it so interesting. Is the fact is that working together, because like Tasha, out of everyone in the entire department, has always been the most towards Jane, especially finding out the truth about her. Obviously, reading the first season was the most suspicious of her. Obviously that eventually passed, but after finding out the truth about her, everything going down this second season from the very beginning, she was the most nah, I don't trust Jane. But it's they're talking to each other, opening up. She's opening, Jane's opening up about Oliver, which Kurt was like, hey, watch out. Fact of the matter is, he might be Sandstorm. It's we didn't see Borden coming, and we suffered for it. So it's they might be trying to find any way to kind of get into our lives. So you have Tasha kind of bringing up the fact is that, well, obviously the Reed situation being like, Reed, oh, he's just running late and everything, which Jane is acting concerned. She's like, no, like, tell me, is there something wrong? Like, she's not just like, is it something we should be concerned about? It's not a situation where I feel like she would have gone off and told, like, Weller, but I think it's a situation where it's like, she was legitimately concerned. She's like, I want to do whatever I can to help. But Tasha's like, nah, it's okay. She's obviously covering for Reed because she cares for him and everything. Because it's like, because Jane also brought up the whole aspect of like, hey, the fact of the matter is, like, how do we supposed to have like a normal love life when we have to deal with all this? And Tasha's like, well, I'm kind of the worst example. I'm the worst person to talk to about that because she's single and she's like, to our knowledge, over the course of this series, I don't think she's been in a relationship, has she? That dude hasn't come up again, has he? Like, since after that whole mirror, has he popped? No, he popped up again. I don't remember if that was this season. God, my memory is terrible. The dude that was blackmailing her last season, not the CIA dude who's dead, but the other dude. He was like was he an attorney general or some crap like that? I get a feeling he did pop up again. I just can't place it. Nevertheless, never seen much of Tasha's dating life, and it's just like, especially now we see that there's possibly something between her and Reed. Like I say, it's just that's what threw me in the loop the most. It's just like her and Jane being all friendly and stuff, like joking and laughing and stuff like that. That was just kind of interesting to me. That even to the point Jane has her look up Oliver because she is unsure. At first, Kurt's like, yeah, obviously, be careful around her, but at the same time, it's like we shouldn't let our job kind of interfere with our love life. We shouldn't be too afraid to put ourselves out there either. He's like, the fact of the matter is, it's like you see the best in people. He's like, it's one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite things about you. And it's like, go ahead and tell her how you feel, Kurt. You need to. Rich brought it up last episode, which really quickly, I love the fact is that we brought it up too. Like, Kurt's like, oh, so that's the tattoo that Rich helped you with. And Patterson was like, yeah, he cracked it a little bit, kind of referring to almost like a jar, like, oh, he cracked it. He got the top off a little bit. Like, I'm the one who figured out the rest of it. Just her need to be better. Like, than just like I think it's more so Patterson doesn't like getting help from people. Like, especially like, like a couple episodes back, the whole Roman situation. She's like, no. Yeah, Roman helped out, but I mean, it was me who came down to it. I created this whole program and everything. I loved it. Nevertheless, which even that Oliver thing took an interesting turn because she's like, so did you change your name? Because she ended up finding out apparently he changed his name. It's like, oh, and Oliver got super pissed. He's like, oh, so you're up here digging into me. The fact of the matter is, I don't know what you do where you're running off to all the time. And the fact is that you have the audacity to ask about my past. But when I ask you about yours, you shut me down. It's like, I accepted that. But it's like, I don't appreciate this double standard of like, I can't ask you about your past or your whole tattoo situation, but you can ask me about me changing my name. And it's like, hey, like, she's like, I have a good reason for it. It's like, what is it? Oh, you're not going to tell me? He's like, I'm out. Even Tasha was like, changing your name doesn't mean anything. But it's like, it's very suspicious. It's like, you just happen to be inside of her life, and it's just like, oh, like, you're getting all close to her and everything. And it's like, who's to say, like, he isn't a plant? Which I'm looking at him as very suspicious now. But it, because he's constantly come and gone in her life. I mean, but it doesn't necessarily seem like he actively goes after her. I feel like, I mean, it could be a lone con of being like, hey, I'm pretending like I don't care because I know that you're going to eventually, I have to kind of give you room to breathe to eventually figure stuff out. I don't know. But, what will most likely turn out to be because I tend to be wrong about these type of situations because I'm always suspicious of the wrong person. But maybe I just eventually find out like, oh, he's actually a good guy. There's nothing bad going on there. But we're just going to have to wait to see how that turns out before I make any final judgments on that. It kind of sucks because it's like, oh, she's getting her life together. Like, she kind of made that leap forward. It's like, okay, I want to take this seriously. And now it's like things are taking a step back because she found out about the whole changing his name thing. So obviously things were suspicious there. So it's like, I mean, I am curious to find out. I mean, he probably has a legitimate reason why he changed his name. Kind of similar to the whole Grundy situation from Riverdale. Once again, I know crossing streams, but nevertheless. And then the final team we had was Reed and Patterson. It's so interesting that Reed is so concerned about Patterson's situation. It's like, oh, so how have you been doing since the whole, like, being kidnapped and kind of tortured, like, by Borden as well as, mainly by Shepard. And she's like, she's okay. Obviously, she doesn't want to talk about it, but she's like, I'm getting help. I'm talking to Dr. Sun. She's like, basically, we do this thing where we break our feelings. And he's like, wait, break your feelings? Like, what the hell does that mean? And she's like, basically, most conversations end for a crime. But like in her way, she looks at it as like, oh, it's definitely helping. Which Reed is like, nah, you don't need to do that. You need to go off, blow some steam. But even throughout the episode, you can see the way Patterson's looking at it. It's like, she's suspicious of him. She even points it out later on. She's like, dude, I know you've been using. He's like, what the hell are you talking about? It's like, I know your eyes were dilated. The fact is you're agitated. Just the fact is you're showing up at work late. She basically also brings up something that, because we don't know that much about Patterson's personal life. The fact that she's like, I have a brother. Don't like talking about it. He basically almost ruined his life because he's addicted to drugs. Or at the very least, she says addicted. Didn't really go into specify, but she's like, he's addicted. And the fact of the matter, she's like, I'm afraid of getting that call at any moment, especially in the middle of the night. That seemed like, oh, her brother probably like OD'd or something. And so she sees the signs, especially because like Reed kind of hesitated earlier in the episode when the time came. Like he was in front of a suspect and he lowered his gun and everything because what the guy was saying, like, no. Like, the fact of the matter is, I'm tired of living the lie, kind of dealing with everything that's ever going across. Essentially, it made Reed kind of make him almost face his own situation. Because things, like, I figured things were going to spiral out of control. And as we see, he's still hitting it up, whatever it is. And it's not even just being with Nikki. He also seemed to be with some random woman, like, at the beginning, well, when we got to his side of the story, so. Almost got himself killed because his reflexes weren't up to par. Like he was so caught off guard by what that guy was saying, plus the fact that it's not in his right head. And Patterson's like, yo, you need to talk to someone. But Reed's like, no, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. Like you're just basically diverting. Like what's the I can't think of the term right now. It's going to bother the crap. I'm going to end up remembering it by the time this is over. But essentially transferring like basically your own issues onto me, which is like, no, you both have very similar issues that you both went through a traumatic event and you don't want to talk about it. Everyone's been telling you to talk about it. It's like, but for him, he's like, no, talking's not going to do anything. You don't know that it's not going to do anything. You just don't want to give it a try because you don't want to relive it. Because like he brought it up with Tasha, being like, oh, it's done. Jones is dead. It's like, no, all this is happening because you're not willing to face stuff. And it's like, yeah, you almost got yourself killed. And the fact of the matter is, it didn't come up, but easily could have been a situation where you could easily get Tasha killed too. Because it's like, who's to say if you weren't so like high or unfocused, maybe like later on in the episode when he did save her, maybe he wouldn't have been able to. And it's just like, he needs to talk to someone. I'm very curious to see what Patterson decides to do, because she's not trying to like ruin anything. She cares about Reed. She wants him to get help before he ends up destroying himself. Or, not just only hurting himself, but like I said, hurting everyone else around him. So, will she go to Kurt about it? Will she keep it a secret? Will she try and get him her help herself? Like I said, brought it up. Things can only get worse going forward for Reed. Just so. I knew it was only a matter of time before it affected his work. So, obviously, he's not in his right mind, but still, it just sucks that he's doing this thing, and it's going to cause some major problems. Like it's already starting, and it's like I can only assume it's only going to get worse because he's going to keep admitting. So it's like I don't have a problem. Like he knows Patterson got him, but it's like he's just too prideful to admit he needs help. Because like he knows Patterson figured him out. It's like it's not like you don't realize you have a problem. You've been doing drugs and stuff like that, and it's like she caught you, but you don't want to admit it. So. And then final note of the episode was the whole, she got in you had Nas getting in contact with her, the mole, not necessarily mole, but her contact inside of Sandstorm who wanted to meet. By the time they meet up, though, it ends with her getting a wire around her neck and is about to get strangled. That's exactly where the episode ends, so she doesn't get outright kill, which granted, that's the second time that's happened, because remember, almost exact thing, I mean, not the almost exact, but similar circumstance happened to Reed back in season 1, where basically he was being threatened to kind of let go of this whole Jane situation, and he had a gun pointed to his head. It's like, stay away from us, or it's going to be danger for Sarah, that type of situation. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I get the feeling like that probably happened somewhere other point too, like something similar like that happened in a car in this show. I don't know. Reed's the one that first came to my mind, but I feel like there might be another one. I might just be imagining things. So that's interesting. So I'm wondering, was her contact found out because they knew the exact code word to be like, oh, this is how we meet up and stuff like that? Or is it like, was that person going to meet her until like Sandstorm found them out? Because to me, I was thinking like the person could be bored. It might not be. I think I've already put that out there before, but if I haven't, I'm just going to say it here too. It's like, I don't know why I just get the feeling like it's bored, and I feel like there's a lot more to his story than we can get. I mean, maybe he is a true devout believer in Sandstorm, or maybe he just wanted to kind of do the right thing. Maybe he at one, much like Jay, maybe at one point 100% believed Sandstorm, but then maybe something or someone approached him and changed him. I guess we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Or it might turn out not to be him at all. It's like, I mean, I feel like Borden's the only person. Not, I mean, it'll probably end up being someone that we don't know. Maybe it's someone that Nas knows, or maybe it's someone from Kurt's past. Maybe, you know, it's someone that Roman or Jane is very familiar with, or something like that. I just get the feeling it can't just be just a nobody. That's why I'm like, it has to be Borden, because he's like the most noticeable, most well-known person amongst Sandstorm now. So I'm like, I don't know. Might turn out to be the case or not. It seems like next episode might be dealing with Borden, because just in a little bit I've seen in a preview, it's showing stuff between him and Patterson. So I'm like, oh, I guess they're going to be the heavy focus of the next episode, especially because Patterson is very like laser focused when it comes to Borden, because that's her main thing is getting revenge against him, because she opened up her heart and then he ended up betraying her, and more so than anything she's pissed at herself for not saying it. So I'm very interested to see what goes on next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.